Okay. Communication is extremely complicated. We don't think about it because for us it's just easy. But actually there's so many steps involved. I've made a communication chain, but this is a simplified communication chain. We'd be here for like 10,000 years if I was going to go over everything. But, you know, the point I'm trying to make is that we don't think about it because it's automatic and it's easy for us, but it's not easy for many people who are on the autism spectrum. And, you know, this chain that I've put on here, which I'm going to go through, this is not the only thing that's going on. You know, alongside the communication chain, there's also the development of attention and listening skills. There's emotional recognition and regulation. There are sensory interests and behaviors and sensory processing, cognition. There's so many other things happening for a child at the same time as developing their communication skills. And all those things are linked together, aren't they, and are enmeshed together, and they all impact on each other. So it's, what I'm trying to say is it's much more complicated than this slide can get across. And I think that the complexity of that, it never goes away. So some of these things are difficult for people on the spectrum all of their lives, but this is interesting, you know, I think that, so we might not realize that because we don't know these things, but also we often, it's back to the round hole, we often assume, because it's easy for us to process language, because it's easy for us to communicate, we often assume that for our children who are on the spectrum, it's easy for them too. We put them into that round hole again, but they're not round pegs, they're square pegs. And, you know, sometimes it's hard for us to see, we need to move them into the square hole. Okay, so this side over, so on the side with look, basically, so that's the input side of the processing chain. So that's all the information coming in, and then the other side is what comes out when we're going to communicate with a person. So the first stage is looking at someone. And even that is, you know, a difficult stage for people who are on the spectrum. And if you think about, I'm sure you've all met kids where it's really hard to get their attention. So that's one problem, to get them to, you know, you might be trying to get their attention and they don't look at you, so they don't realize that you're trying to get their attention. Their mind might be on other things. And also, you know, it might be uncomfortable for them to look at you. This is the thing, when a child is young, there are different reasons why someone might not look at you, and we can't ask young children why that is. We can't find out about that. And still, unfortunately, in schools, I still often hear children saying, even at secondary school, that their teachers get angry with them because they don't look at them as much as the teacher expects them to. But, you know, this is not bad behavior, is it? This is something which is difficult. So that's the first stage on the input side of the processing chain, to be looking at someone, to show them, I want to communicate with you. And often it's not easy for people on the spectrum to show you, I want to communicate with you. And then the next stage is that you notice the non-verbal communication. So you notice someone's facial expression, you notice the tone of their voice, you notice their body language, their gestures. And this is a really interesting one, because of course, if you don't look so much at another person, then you're not going to notice those things. You're not going to learn about facial expression. You're not going to learn about what that looks like on someone's face. You're not going to learn about the tone of their voice. These are really, really important things. And again, I think these things, we don't actually realize how important they are. I have had many situations with children where, for example, they've talked over me. I got asked if I was a mum or a nan the other day. And when I said I was a mum, the child said to me, oh, but you look so much like a nan. And they weren't looking at my face. So they didn't realize the kind of what expression on my face when they said that. But actually, it's really important to read another person's face, isn't it? Because then you know what they're feeling, you know what they're thinking. And if you don't do that, if it's not easy for you to do that, and you find looking at them difficult, there's a whole lot of information about communication and another person that you don't develop. Okay, so that's the next level up, which are both these already. We've only just got to the first two, and they're difficult for people who are on the autism spectrum. Not for everybody, but for some people. Okay, and then we've got listening and hearing. So the difference is that hearing, that's like accidental, like I can hear a sound out of the window. I'm not really tuning into it to hear exactly what it is, but my ears are picking it up. But listening is a conscious effort to be able to process what somebody is saying to you. And, you know, attention control is often fragile in autism spectrum disorder, and often difficult, and sensory difficulties often impact on that too. So that's going to be something which is hard. Remembering. So memory is another area that's really, it's difficult, again, because there's many different reasons for this, but it's often difficult for people on the spectrum to hold information in their short-term memory. And then we go to understanding words, then to understanding sentences and understanding the meaning. So understanding the meaning is a really important one. So for example, I might understand all the words. The word, for example, if there was a sentence, I like your shoes. So I understand that, I like your shoes. I understand all of that, I understand in a sentence. But if I say it like this, oh, I like your shoes, you know that I don't like your shoes. But that involves the non-verbal understanding as well as the verbal, and that can be really, really tricky often for people on the spectrum. The context and the non-verbal communication part of it is very difficult. And, you know, this goes back to this part down here of interpreting non-verbal communication, and it's also linked, I think, to being able to put together information to understand everything that's happening. You might have a focus on one part, just the words, and not be able to put that together with the intonation or the facial expression or the gestures. Okay, so it's already very complicated on that side, and there's lots of areas which I hope you can see are difficult for people whose minds are working in a different way, and they are understanding, they're processing information in a different way. And then we come round to, if I want to reply to what someone said to me, rigid thinking can make it difficult to have ideas and to know what to say. And I often meet people with autism who just struggle to use language as a way to express their ideas. It's just clunky sometimes for them. And that's when sometimes it helps them to be able to use language they've heard somewhere else, to use kind of like language they've heard on television programs or they've heard other people say, because it's just not so easy always to generate that language spontaneously. So the last bit on here is changing and adapting, and that is really linked to what we were saying over here about nonverbal communication. So for example, if I was in a room in front of you, I'd be looking at your faces a lot to see, oh, are they interested in what I'm saying? Are they understanding what I'm saying? And then I would adapt what I was saying so that it's accessible for you. That is what reciprocity is in a conversation, isn't it? That you're looking at each other and you're reading each other's responses to what you're saying. And that's really, really, really difficult, again, for people who are on the autism spectrum. So all of this chain is very, very tricky. And as I said to you, it doesn't stop being tricky. And I think that maybe because this is invisible, we don't always think about that enough.